How would you choose to die if you could? Homer Simpson seemed to believe he would die either by too much happiness. Sounds okay, right? He also predicted how he may die in a naked girl avalanche. Treehouse of Horror XV, Season 16, Episode 1. Sounds good, lads. When you think about it, probably not. Such choices are beyond our control. Well, most of us. Who knows what Elon's final plans are? Will mostly die from age-related illnesses, cancer, or unfortunate accidents on the road. But there are some ways of dying that are more elaborate, crueler, and mercifully rarer. It is these terrible ways of kicking the bucket that we discuss in the list. Pray these fates never befall you. After you read, try some happy thoughts. We suggest thinking about a puppy, not a rabbit one though. Number 10, falling to your death at a popular beauty spot. Or for that matter, any unintentional fall from a great height, really. However, falling to your death from, say, a viewing station in the Grand Canyon might be slightly worse given the unexpected nature of your sudden plunge. Bungee jumping or skydiving accidents, as awful as they must be, have the individual already in a state of excitement, given the activity itself. The slight chance of death is part of the thrill. Smiling for a selfie or lining up your viewer finder to catch the perfect sunset doesn't usually include the thought of a possible fall into some jagged rocks hundreds of feet below. The odds of dying at one of the U.S. most world-famous natural attractions is 1 in 400,000. These types of probabilistic statements don't mean that one person per 400,000 people who visit will die. It means on average. So if you try and take that perfect sunset selfie too close to an edge, slip, and take the last plunge, you will be that 1 in 400,000. It's behavior-driven, not a numerically bound phenomenon. Take one case recounted by onmygrandcanyonpark.com. These cases of unexpected falls are tragic, including a 38-year-old from Texas pretending to fall to scare his daughter, who then really did fall 400 feet, or 122 meters to his death, back in 2015. As the title of this list suggests, awful. Number 9, radiation poisoning. Given a quick scan of this listicle title and that of this entry, you may be forgiven for uttering a gloriously 90s, well, duh. But are you fully aware of what acute radiation poisoning entails? Hisashi Ochi, a 35-year-old worker at a fuel enrichment plant near Tokimura, Japan, if I pronounced that right, found out in 1999. After a critical event that prompted mass evacuations in the surrounding area, Ochi was among several technicians that were treated for the effects of radiation burns and sickness. Ochi spent 83 days in a Tokyo hospital with a white blood cell count so low that he effectively ceased to have an immune system. Despite this awful situation, the effects were initially hidden from observers at the hospital. One nurse noted that she believed he could go home on the day of his transfer, only showing what seemed like sunburn and some swelling. But with only 10% of the normal levels of white blood cells, every pathogen imaginable could now prey upon the helpless man. And many did. His skin began to crack and slow away. He began to secrete 3 liters of diarrhea a day. He began to bleed from his orifices, and needed to be heavily bandaged due to ever-spreading, weeping, and bloody sores on his body. His eyelids fell off almost completely. He eventually died of multiple organ failure, despite the best efforts of the medical team and his family. They insisted on having him revive each time his heart stopped, which may have contributed to his eventual death. Number 8, being the victim of a serial killer. People often focus far too much on killers in our society. True crime is a massive area of interest. In and of itself, this isn't a bad thing. This sort of focus can lead to a greater scrutiny and knowledge, aiding in prevention and encouraging situational awareness. All too often, unfortunately, the victims get all but forgotten. Many documentaries, YouTubers, and journalists don't fall into this trap, but plenty do. Even to that point of a gross sort of anti-hero worship for psychopathic monsters develops. Instead of seeing it from the killer's perspective, deeds and patterns of behavior, consider the experience of the victim. The horror, the helplessness, the pain. There are plenty of examples to highlight here, but given the glory-seeking nature of many of these degenerate murders, perhaps it's better for you to do your own research in this instance. But keep it academic, lest the lurid draw of these crimes become a bit too entertaining. And when you really think about it, does that not make this way of dying all the worse? If a person becomes the victim of a serial murderer today, they will have thoughts of who would play them, and more obliquely, their killer in the movie. Zac Efron played Bundy. Number 7, getting attacked or eaten by a bear. We forgot that humans were prey for most of our history. With all of our inventions, guns, secure houses, barbed wire, around 200 people a year still die from some animal-related incidents in the U.S. alone. In India, around 300 people die each year just due to elephant attacks. Remember, they also have tigers, snakes, and bears over there. It is this last predator that should strike the most acute fear in us. Sure, other big toothy mammals still roam the earth, but none tend to kill as cruelly as our Urson cousins. Large felines, for instance, opt to quickly kill by means of crushing suffocation. Bears don't care about quick or painless. They take their time. Often, they eat you alive. Number 6, exposure. Exposure to the elements is no fun. As anyone who has forgotten an umbrella on a rainy day will attest to, the exposure found in official documents regarding missing persons, however, is more than an annoying inconvenience and the resulting sniffy nose. Death from/by exposure may be a conclusion that leaves readers of news stories saddened, but also with a sense of, well, there we go then. The person died by being outside. That's why we remain terminally online in our man cave/lady lounges. The human body has an inbuilt will to survive. Unless one attempts suicide by refusing nutrition and hydration in the wilds, most lost, inexperienced, injured/unprepared people will still strive to stay alive, prolonging their suffering and inevitable demise. In cold or high altitude environments, for instance, you probably die from hypothermia. Uncontrollable shivering is followed by amnesia, confusion, and slurred speech. Then the fun really begins. You'll stop shivering, hallucinate, and may engage in strange behaviors like paradoxical undressing and terminal burrowing. The strange symptoms that tend to hasten your frozen demise, and a dose of malnutrition and frostbitten limbs and digits, and you'll have a truly miserable end. In the desert, however, it's a good deal slower. Dehydration will kill you quicker than more temperate climates. Still, the pain from sunburn and the hastened organ failure, sunstroke causing punking, and general confusion guarantee your death will be awful. In the deep woods, well, it can take months. Take the case of Christopher McCandless. He died 113 or so days after trying to live closer to nature in the wilds of Alaska. He seemed to have starved to death or slowly poisoned himself by eating the wrong berries. He recorded most of his experience and thoughts in his journal. That's a long, lonely death. 5. Contracting this cruel disease. One of the main fears that mankind holds, alongside snakes, spiders, the dark, death, and heights, is that of losing one's mind. Iris Murdoch, the great Anglo-Irish author and philosophical, once said, "At the moment I'm just falling, as if it were I think of things and then go away." Pointed and trying to consider. She had Alzheimer's disease. A similar cruel illness is frontal temporal dementia. Unlike other disorders that fall into the brackets of dementia, this illness that affects the brain's frontal lobe tends to begin around 2 decades sooner than the other forms. From 45 onward, typically other forms tend to begin around age 65 and above. The commonly known symptom, namely memory loss, doesn't occur until late in the condition's cruel progress. Before this, erratic and profound behavioral changes, disordered and slurred speech, and general loss of mental acuity come first. Sufferers can get easily distracted, engage in risk-taking behavior, and undergo profound personality changes. Then the memory begins to go. This condition starts to look more like conventional dementias, like Alzheimer's. This illness provides a bitter, horrid starter before an equally appalling main course. For more info, check out the International Society for Frontotemporal Dementias. My grandma has Alzheimer's dementia. It sucks. I know I just broke character, but it sucks. 4. Explosive decompression. This is probably the least likely death the average will suffer from all the entries on this list. Unless our data analysis hasn't picked up that over 50% of work on oil rigs. The effects of rapid decompression, the near immediate change of pressure in the gases and fluids inside your body, are painful enough on their own. Look out for hypoxia, burst lungs, trauma from objects flying around, and if at altitude, extreme frostbite and rapid onset altitude sickness. But if you happen to work under an oil rig and the proper procedures are not followed in the diving bell, you may not live long enough to suffer these symptoms. During the Byford Dolphin diving bell incident in 1983, for instance, 4 divers died to the effects mentioned above. 1 did not. Norwegian diver Truls Helvik, 34, was bisected. His body fragmented. All the internal organs in his chest cavity, except his trachea and a section of the small intestine, were forcefully expelled as he was dragged through a 60-centimeter or 24-inch gap caused by a jammed door in decompression chamber 1. By the extreme pressure change, viscera was found 9 meters, 30 feet above the exterior pressure door. Number 3, rabies. Animal attacks are bad enough as discussed above, but the after-effects, if one manages to survive the initial onslaught, can be just as bad. The effects of rabies are simply terrifying, both to witness and to suffer. The mania and aggression, the frothing mouth, the painful involuntary muscle spasms, the hallucinations, and the strange violent aversion to water, hydrophobia, that leads to profound dehydration that worsens each of the other symptoms, are chilling to see in those unlikely enough to contract this illness. Luckily, good prophylactic treatments are available, driving worldwide deaths down quite a bit. But you must get treated before these serious symptoms manifest. If you don't, rabies is fatal in almost every case. Number 2, ingesting water hemlock. A walk in the woods can be a wonderful way to relieve stress. You'll come across so much fun stuff to look at and interact with. Babbling brooks, all manner of fascinating birds, ancient trees, and pretty flowers. You may also want to gather some wild mushrooms, berries, nuts, and edible leaves. How about making a quick lunch for yourself? Some pecans toasted on your campfire, spread over a bed of foraged wild garlic and dandelion leaves, drizzled with the juice of some wild raspberries and sliced wild turnip. Sound good? Yeah, you're probably going to die in extreme pain, unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Water hemlock is very close in smell and form to wild turnip/carrot. It's also one of the most poisonous plants found in both Europe and North America. It can cause death as quickly as 15 minutes if ingested. It can even kill you with prolonged contact with your skin. A death that includes excessive drooling, nausea, and explosive vomiting, profuse sweating, dizziness, stabbing, stomach pains, extreme lethargy, delirium, and uncontrollable bowel movements. Then before you die, troubled breathing, convulsions, heart problems, kidney failure, and coma. So only sniff flowers you recognize, people. Daisies and dandelions only. And number 1, being boiled. This doesn't happen all that often anymore, thankfully. At least not a specific punishment for nabbing your neighbor's goat. It is true, however, that many cultures have historically indulged in dipping their naughty doers into hot liquids. People do, however, succumb to scalding and burns from industrial accidents. Take the tragic case of 25-year-old Ismail from 2021. He was preparing a huge vat of chicken soup for a wedding he was catering in the Zakho district of Iraq. After sustaining third-degree burns to 70% of his body, he was rushed to the hospital, dying after 5 agonizing days.